Donald Trump's pissed that young girls were poached from his spa at Mar-a-Lago, and that's why he had a falling out with Epstein? Doesn't that mean he just self-confessed to knowing that Epstein liked young women and girls, and he should have saved them instead of allowed them to fall into the clutches of Epstein? What kind of crazy confession is that? On his way out of Scotland, where he went to go play golf in order to avoid questions about Epstein. And what else is going on with the relationship between Ghislaine Maxwell's lawyer and Donald Trump's personal criminal lawyer? Why hasn't that been discussed in the public? And what about the relationship between Alan Dershowitz, who represented Epstein and now is promoting Ghislaine Maxwell being seen as a victim to have her being given a pardon? The world is turned upside down, but we turn it right side up on Legal AF, the podcast. Take a listen. So what did you learn in the last 72 hours in this rapidly moving story that is Jeffrey Epstein and Donald Trump's inability to solve for the equation of how do I get the F out of this Epstein scandal? What have you learned?
I mean, first of all, the more he talks, the more he just digs his own grave. It's like he just can't help himself. And the fact that he was talking about the fact that they were best friends. They were thick as thieves, both in New York and in Florida. They had there's all sorts of pictures of them together at various social activities. In fact, they were so close that Donald Trump, as reported by the Washington Post, and now is the subject of a $50 million legal battle that he's suing Rupert Murdoch for, he also participated in his bound birthday book, where he hand drew a drawing of a naked woman and then signed his name in Sharpie where the pubic hair region would be. That's how close they were. Those are supposed to be his closest friends and family. Well, obviously that's a problem for Donald Trump, and people who have seen these files, the quote unquote Epstein files that there's all these fights over, have said Donald Trump is all over the place, up and down those files and those folders all over the place. So he's squirming. He's trying to get out of it. He's trying to make excuses. He's saying, oh, well, we had a falling out years ago. Hadn't seen that guy in a long time. And apparently that is apparently true, that they weren't as close in recent years. But he says it's because that guy was a creep. In other words, he knew that he was a sexual predator. He knew because he was stealing young women employees from Mar-a-Lago's spa. First of all, what does that say about Mar-a-Lago and their spa, that they have all these young girls working there? But in any event, that's apparently what the falling out was over. What's troubling to me is what happened after that. So, okay, they have a falling out for whatever reason. I think it's pretty clear it was over a real estate deal, and they were bidding on the same piece of property in Florida, that it wasn't about young girls. But be that as it may, what Donald Trump has done since then, I think, is beyond atrocious. He has engaged in this whole Epstein file, talking out of both sides of your mouth, and he is just digging a grave for himself that thankfully even the right-wing MAGA people who want these files to be released, thankfully they're not giving up on that. And so what's happening now is the Senate Democrats moved to compel the Trump administration to release Epstein material. It was led by New York Senator Chuck Schumer, who's the minority leader, the Democratic minority leader in the Senate, and plus 7 other Democrats on the Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee. They sent a letter to the Department of Justice basically asking them to turn over the files. And this is something called the Senate Rule of Five, which is what it's colloquially called. It's a statute from 1928, believe it or not. I love that the Democrats are invoking these old laws that aren't used very often, just the way the Trump administration likes to do. And this law basically gives government agencies they have to comply if there are relevant information if there are 5 members of a particular committee, which is the chamber's chief oversight panel, if they request it. So this is a little known rule, and there's one in the House, there's one in the Senate. I think the House actually requires 7 members, and for the Senate, it's 5. And Chuck Schumer got that, and it's caused this huge rift, within the Republican Party. In fact, it was so dramatic that, as we've talked about over the last couple of weeks, that Mike Johnson and that he shut down the House early to go to recess. And we'll see what ends up happening. Look, both parties have invoked this special law that can get all these files if they ask for it, but it's never gone all the way up to the Supreme Court. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes. But it's really interesting that they are invoking this. This is the statute's 5 United States Code 2954. It says the executive agency on request of, and then they insert the Committee on Homeland Security and the Governmental Affairs of the Senate, or any 5 members thereof, shall submit any information requested of it relating to any matter within the jurisdiction of the committee. We request the full and complete Epstein files as identified by the DOJ and the FBI. So it's a great letter that Chuck Schumer wrote with these requests. He basically puts in Trump and Bondi's language about what there is and that it exists and that I'm going to release it, but now I'm not. And it's really going to push this issue, at least in a really big way. So I'm really excited to see how this plays out.
Yeah, that's on the Congress side. And then we've got the people finally waking up to the relationship between Ghislaine Maxwell's lawyer and Todd Blanche, which I reported on last week with the exact same clip. Politico woke up this week and found the clip that I found last week of a giggling Todd Blanche on a little watched podcast, although I watched it. That is what was run by David Oscar Marcus, the lawyer for Ghislaine Maxwell, in which they were giggling like schoolgirls. And obviously have a close relationship. Neither one of them are transparent about their relationship, which is obviously a part of this cover-up and conspiracy. Now the mainstream media woke up and said, wait a minute, these two look to be buddies. Yeah, they're buddies. And there's a lot of buddies involved in this. Dershowitz and Marcus are buddies. Dershowitz got accused, although she eventually retracted it, got accused by Virginia Joffrey before she killed herself in April of being part of the whole island of Dr. Epstein and the problems there. And he's best friends with Marcus from their days at Harvard. Dershowitz represented Epstein and got him that non-prosecution agreement in 2008 in the Southern District of Florida, that if they didn't get that, it would have, they properly prosecuted him, maybe hundreds, if not thousands of women and girls would not have been sexually abused by Jeffrey Epstein. So that's on Dershowitz. Now, Dershowitz is turning around without revealing to the public that he was involved and represented Epstein to get that non-prosecution agreement that Ghislaine Maxwell is using at the United States Supreme Court in the last several days to get her out from under her conviction. Even though she's not named in the non-prosecution agreement, she's not named. She wasn't a signatory. She didn't participate. She didn't sign it. It doesn't deal with the Southern District of New York. Notwithstanding all of that, Dershowitz never reveals his relationships to any of these people, which is also part of the cover-up. And now you've got the questioning that I did a week ago coming in. I just saw a video on one of my quote-unquote competitors who said, maybe the conspiracy started when they fired James Comey's daughter 3 weeks ago, who prosecuted Ghislaine Maxwell. I said, yeah, maybe they did. I said that 3 weeks ago, that was the start. You get rid of the line prosecutor who knows everything about the case first, because I'm sure the conversation, if we ever get the records, between Blanche and David Oscar Marcus, the lawyer for Ghislaine Maxwell, happened sometime like, we got to get rid of the prosecutor. I got to be able to go into this alone without any knowledge. This is Blanche's thought process. We got to get rid of her. It's good. She lost part of the Diddy case. Good. The people will think it's over that. Let's get rid of her. And he goes in to meet with her. You've been a prosecutor. Goes in to meet with on an immunity that Trump signed off on of a convicted child sex trafficker for 2 full days, and doesn't take any of the prosecutors that prosecuted the case along with him. He doesn't know the case well enough. He doesn't want to know the case well enough to be able to catch her in a lie. which is part of the immunity deal. But of course, that gets ignored. So this Dershowitz, Marcus, Blanche connectivity gets ignored by mainstream media, although we've been talking about it at length on the Midas Touch Network and on Legal AF, and what it means for the overriding cover-up. And it's the Dems. You and I actually talked a couple of years ago about the Gang of Five, the Rule of Five, because that's what you got to do when you're out of power. When you're out of power and you can't get the committee chair to sign off on your subpoenas, you got to do something else. Unfortunately, there's these other ways of large groups getting together and forcing the issue. And this is what you got. This is the playbook when you're out of power, when you're a party out of power, trying to get back into power. It's one of the problems the Democrats are having in their kind of reputation right now. I mean, I wasn't shocked when I saw 36% of America would trust the Democrats with the government, almost, if not a little bit lower than Trump. It's because they're out of power, and it's very difficult to see what they're doing. There's only so many times you can take to social media. There's only so many times you can interview J.B. Raskin or Cory Booker. I love them. There's only so many things you can do about, what they're doing to challenge. I object. I strenuously object. Until we get back into power, making real change for the American people's lives is more difficult. And so we have to deal with that. Talk about your thought process about what your old office could do related to Ghislaine Maxwell.
Yeah, so just for the heck of it, just batting around in my head, could the Manhattan DA's office open up an investigation and subpoena materials and really look at this case as well? And it's an interesting exercise to go through in your head. There are some logistical hurdles. One of them is double jeopardy, because there are final adjudications in both the Epstein case and the Maxwell case. She was convicted and sentenced, and he was abated. His case it's called abated by death because he's dead. So anyway, what are you going to do? You can't prosecute somebody who's not alive. So the question is, what could they do? Could they then issue subpoenas and try to get evidence and see what is out there? There are some tricky aspects to that, not just because of double jeopardy, but because of discovery laws. When you prosecute someone, like say they do get a third party, somebody else who had sex with an underage person, there's depending on the age, et cetera, and trafficking and rape laws in New York, it could happen from a statute of limitations period, even though it was a while ago. But there's discovery laws that require the DA's office to be able to turn over so many documents that I don't know that they could have access to because the feds would refuse to turn it over. So there are some logistical problems with prosecution, but there is one thing that I think the Manhattan DA's office can and should do. And I say the Manhattan DA's office because some of the allegations were here in Manhattan, and they can open up a grand jury investigation. If you remember, in Georgia, for example, Fani Willis did a grand jury investigation first, and then there was a report and a recommendation, and then the criminal case. Then they assembled a new grand jury and brought an actual criminal case. And that can happen in New York too. And in fact, New York has always issued grand juries investigations, not a lot, but maybe one or two a year. And it's over some issue like this, frankly, something to figure out, why did Jeffrey Epstein get such a sweetheart deal in Florida? Why, despite all of the things that are going on, what did people know, like Donald Trump and others? And just what the extent of the abuse was here, and whether there are any other third parties, meaning other people who also engaged in these acts with underage girls. And so if they were to do that, what they would do is they would open up an investigatory grand jury. They would issue subpoenas. They would call witnesses. And at the end, they would issue a report. Again, it's not a prosecution, but it's a report on the issue, on the matter, on the situation, on the case. So there are things that if they wanted to, they could do, but I don't think anyone should overpromise because there are some limitations based on what we just talked about. And frankly, Ms. Defendant Maxwell is saying that when Jeffrey Epstein received a like a non-prosecution agreement, that should apply to her too. So she's trying to stretch that, which I've never seen something like that apply to a co-conspirator. But that's what she's trying to do. That the sweetheart deal that he got in Florida, where he pled to like a misdemeanor or something crazy like that, and in exchange everything else got forgiven, that she's now making an application before the court saying that should apply to her as well. But I've never seen that before. I've never seen a co-conspirator or a co-defendant also get swept up into an umbrella of a deal like that.
Well, the agreement does have a mention that the co-conspirators, and there's 4 that are named, and then other co-conspirators that are not named, won't be prosecuted by the Southern District of Florida. So maybe that is a little bit different than other NPA non-prosecution agreements that you entered into.
Was she one of the ones named?
No. And you'd have to, in order for her argument to hold water, you'd have to believe that the lawyers for Epstein, including Alan Dershowitz, negotiated a narrow non-prosecution agreement for their client, meaning only the Southern District of Florida. But for the co-conspirators who were not their clients, they got them a national bar to prosecution anywhere in the United States. Who believes that?
Yeah.
But how is that even possible? So I get the co-conspirators couldn't have been prosecuted in Florida. I just don't get how that backs up on somebody who didn't participate, even though they're a co-conspirator, in the Southern District of New York. And the Supreme Court is, I'm sorry, they may love Donald Trump and want to bend over backwards on the executive theory and give him all the powers, superpowers that they can. But child sex trafficking and somebody that's not the president of the United States, I just don't see this. And to be clear, because you and I talk a lot about in the courtroom experience, because we both have it, she's not arguing. I want to make this clear to people. She's not arguing that she's not guilty. She's not arguing that she didn't get a fair trial. She's not arguing any aspect of her trial went awry. She's not arguing that evidence came in that shouldn't have, that evidence should have come in that didn't, that there was jury tampering, witness tampering, prosecutorial misconduct, the indictment shouldn't have ever been brought, grand jury problems. She's not arguing any of that. She's arguing, I got convicted. However, I should never have been prosecuted because I was an unnamed co-conspirator for this agreement from 20 years ago. And the government should stand by its deals, and Donald Trump's the ultimate deal maker, therefore, by the transitive property, let me out of prison. That's her argument. I just don't see the Supreme Court finding that remotely interesting.
Yeah.
Right? But Marcus is, look, and he's got a client. We all have clients. We all have, we know people that have clients, and we know he's doing his level best to try to get her that pardon, and he's working it. I joke in every one of my hot takes about it. When there's a bank of microphones, even if it doesn't involve his case, there's David Oscar Marcus in the last several days. If you didn't know him before, it's hard to miss him now. And he's just campaigning. And she's basically said, well, I got what I wanted. I might get a pardon. You want me to go to Congress? Oh, no, I don't think so. Unless I get a full immunity and probably a pardon, you're never going to see the backside of my ass is sitting in Congress, or I'm going to take the fifth. And she will, because her number one goal right now is not to die as an old lady, a convicted sex trafficker in jail. That's her number one goal. And she's trying to figure out through David Oscar Marcus whether Donald Trump's intent to save his own ass is greater than how immoral it would be for a president to grant a pardon to a convicted sex trafficker. That would be political suicide for anybody else. But the fact that he still hasn't ruled it out, it's just leveled, like told the American people, I may do a lot of crazy things you don't agree with, but I would never pardon Ghislaine Maxwell. He won't say that because he's trying to figure out politically and strategically how it helps Donald Trump. And that's what he will do. And somebody will tell him that from the political calculus, it doesn't matter. You're ironclad, you're Teflon. You can pardon her or this guy or that guy, no matter what their crimes, and it will never back up on you. And if he believes that, he'll pull the trigger on it. And if he doesn't, he won't. And that's where, only if it helps him, only if he believes it helps him. Welcome back. I founded that show 5 years ago. It's hard to believe, with Ben Meiselas, and we do it every Wednesday and Saturday at 8 p.m. Eastern time for a live recording on YouTube. We're top 20 YouTube podcast It's fantastic. It's all because of you. And then, of course, audio podcasts could use a little loving too. Hit the audio podcast as well. Full-length podcast, Wednesdays and Saturdays. Wednesdays, I do the show with Karen Friedman, Agnifilo. Saturday with Ben Mycelis. And then we do updates and hot takes like this about every hour here on Midas Touch and on Legal AF, the YouTube channel. Take a minute, hit the free subscribe button for Legal AF YouTube. So until my next report, I'm Michael Popok. I'm Michael Popok, and I got some big news for our audience. Most of you know me as the co-founder of Midas Touch's Legal AF and the Legal AF YouTube channel, or as a 35-year national trial lawyer. Now, building on what we started together on Legal AF, I've launched a new law firm, the Popok Firm, dedicated to obtaining justice through compassionate and zealous legal representation. At the Popok Firm, we are focused on obtaining justice for those who have been injured or damaged by a life-altering event by securing the highest dollar recoveries. I've been tirelessly fighting for justice for the last 35 years, so my own law firm organically building on my Legal AF work just feels right. And I've handpicked a team of top-tier trial fighters and settlement experts throughout all 50 states known as big auto injury attorneys who have the know-how to beat heartless insurance companies, corporations, government entities, and their attorneys. Big Auto's attorneys working with my firm are rock stars in their respective states and collectively responsible for billions of dollars in recoveries. So if you or a loved one have been on the wrong side of a catastrophic auto, motor vehicle, rideshare, or truck accident, suffered a personal injury, or been the victim of medical malpractice, employment harassment or discrimination, or suffered a violation of your civil and constitutional rights, then contact the Popok Firm today at 1-877-POPOK-AF or by visiting my website at www.thepopokfirm.com and fill out a free case evaluation form. And if we determine that you have a case and you sign with us, we don't get paid unless you do. The Popok Firm, fighting for your justice every step of the way.